This is my first afternoon in Panama after a 3-hour flight down from Mexico City. And I am visiting Panamá Viejo, which means Old Panama. In fact, it was the original Panama. And I'm going to read so I don't have to dupe this in later. The oldest Spanish settlement on the Pacific coast of America, founded in August 15, 1519 by Pedreus Davila, and destroyed in 1671 in the wake of Sir Henry Morgan's invasion. The town was never rebuilt. In fact, it was moved down to where I'll be on Friday, which is Casco Vieja. As you can see in the drawing, the town started to the north down that road and then continued through the area that I panned through a moment ago. Right here where I'm standing was Las Casas Oeste, the remains of it at least. These are some hypothetical reconstruction drawings. And this is a hypothetical of how the center square might have looked. This is El Calpito. Hypothetical drawing. And this look at the hypothetical of the square. To the left is the cathedral. That apparently was the stairway that went up to the second level, that had a porch, if you will. It doesn't exist anymore unless this rock here is the foundation of it, but I don't think it was that wide, but it might have been. I don't know if the bricking that we see in these buildings so far was original or whether it was used to restore the building or shore it up, although I'm not sure without that arch along that wall in its entirety would have stood. In the construction, that is an alcove there. The white portion is the remains of what looked like some kind of plaster, and it was in the shape of kind of concave like a shell. Just as an alternative to the rain, notice that these rocks look like they've been dressed. Whether this was the original surface or not, don't know, but I'm guessing that it probably was. Additional outbuildings. I don't know what the holes are for. Normally they would be for posts that hold up roofs, but these are so random I'm guessing they might have been used as ventilation. And throughout this building is the evidence of history's scum, the vandals. This is a detail in this structure in the arch window that opens to the plaza area. That structure was apparently an earlier way for people to climb up into the church. But now there's this excellent structure that I'm walking on. This tower has 3 floors. I'm on the 3rd one now. And it has superb views of the ocean front. It was thought that because of the design of this tower, its look alone, utilitarian design, that it had a defensive capability in the sense of a lookout. Although you wonder exactly what they were looking for. If the tide's out right now, even when it's in, it can't be that deep. But it may have given enough view and therefore enough warning to prepare for the defense. Obviously it didn't work. Out in front of us was, in the land that's closest to us, not separated by that estuary, was occupied by various kinds of buildings that you'll see in this next drawing. Casas Reales, Casas de los Genoveses, and number 3, the Puerto. Those last 2 would have been right in that area, and apparently there's still some remnant of archaeological evidence. This view looks to the east. The road was built to apparently that building in the middle was the Casa de Alarcón and the Casa del Obispo. Doesn't define that one. And apparently behind the trees was the Convento de Santo Domingo. And now looking north, again up there a ways, probably within the half a mile, was the end of the north end of the town, the original town. And now, of course, is modern Panama City. That building framed in the lower corner of this opening was the Casa Terren. The diagram doesn't seem to designate that wall as anything specific, but I think between it and the road that you can see going straight up in the picture to the north seems to be a depression, which would appear to be the road as shown in this diagram. So this is Casa Oeste, this is Terren, and over here is where that remnant of wall is. This shows the evolution of the church, and I'll just pan slowly across this panel. The original church was a simple wooden thatch structure. But then in 1539, a new church had to be built as a result of fire, and the church was changed, its location changed and built in stone. But in fact, they didn't build it in stone, they built it in wood. So this was the principal nave, this long section here, and then it had the 2 chapels on either side, which gave it that cross-like look. This cartoon illustrates the tragedy of the attempt in 1540 to rebuild the thatch cathedral in stone, all of which was sent from Spain along with stonemasons, images, idols, and so forth. But right at the isthmus, it sunk, and they were left with their ramshackle wood one. And this is a beautifully designed stairway structure. antique wood and steel and chrome or aluminum. In return for its legitimation of conquest, it demanded that a church be built in every community. These are just some examples. Who knows how old some of these scratchings are? Notice the word Egypt. So notice that I have entered here from near the Cabildo into what would have been the main altar area. And presumably that's still the original foundation of it. Over there would be one of the chapels. Again, notice those holes that appear to be lined with brick. There, the altar. The second chapel. And then the tower itself. It took about 5 years to restore that tower and install the beautiful stairway system, the landing system that they have. My guess is that that tubular indentation was an original access to the belfry. Here's the before picture of the tower, but look closely at that front window, and just above it you'll see the red, indicating, I think, that the brick was already a part of it. There were graves that they found embedded in the ground within the perimeter of the church. Some of them had small metal pins in them, and they believe that those were to hold various expensive garments that the deceased were buried within. This is the Casa Terren house, or houses again, and apparently it had a front area that had these columns. He was apparently the wealthiest man in the 1500s to live in Panama. And I'm guessing that this was one of the main entrances to the church. It also had columns. What's left of the bases and the stairs. Again, notice the somewhat randomness of these holes. Now it's very hot and humid down here, and this is the winter time when it doesn't rain, which it just did. I can only imagine, which is what you try to do when you're in an old place like this, is how did the people live? How did they use this room? What were those little holes for there? Were they also ventilation, even at that level? And what about animals crawling in if they were? Was this a well? Would make sense, wouldn't it? Let's see if it goes down. Well, not very far. You can see that I've just walked over and off of some walls. Maybe that grade level of grass was actually lower than it is now. And look on the interior here, more columns. But would this have been an interior patio, for example, or plaza? And notice the construction of the walls. Flat and or dressed rock on the outsides, and then filled in with rock rubble. Or in that instance, brick. Perhaps they used brick to form a neat architectural element like a window. And here another design element somewhat reminiscent of the Anasazi, but large rows, levels of big rock, and then some brick, and then some more rock, and then filled in with small pieces. And here, kind of a curious line of stone that zigzags. Perhaps it was a wall. Here it separates, forming almost in the perfect kind of a Y. Here's a picture of an excavation of that area, and it shows that Y, but it doesn't define why it's there or what its purpose was, except it seems to suggest it was part of the road system. So maybe it was some design relevant to that. This is the largest of the private homes, Casa Arcan, from 1640. It's also known as the Casa del Obispo, which apparently means bishop because it was occupied by the bishop at one time. But these were pretty substantial buildings. Again, what would we learn if the stones could talk? Perhaps a stairway? Notice an original arch for some purpose, and then filled in. And what would this huge room have been used for? Here another very large complex, whether it was one or many houses. The interpretive brochure doesn't say. Notice the size of those windows. These were large buildings, large windows, but then maybe that gave air movement. And maybe the area I'm standing in now that I'm panning across was, again, a plaza, a central plaza. Whether this was residential or not, don't know. Unfortunately, that tree is destroying part of it. Here a long view down this wall. Same with this one. And this other corner. And with that last big building to my back, I'll pan around, and it's interesting to notice just the rocks that we can see, but to recognize that quite a bit beyond us in those trees, this same large city existed. What is fascinating to me is that Morgan presented such a danger that it would justify deserting this town. I'm thinking these round structures had to be wells. Another structure being restored. I think it's some kind of swallowtail flycatcher. This tree looks like it has either orange flowers or orange leaves, but that's not what they are. Okay, here's what they are. Here's in their closed position. They fall. They're attached where it's light green. And they fall, and I'll open it up in a second. And they open up into this little structure, which looks like a flower within a flower, leaving this little cup here. And I think there's some kind of fluid in there that maybe hummingbirds or other birds are able to get at. But isn't that interesting? I don't know whether these little green things become something more like leaves or whatever. Notice the critters crawling around, lots of critters. I think it's a vulture. More than just a restoration, it looks like an archaeological dig. As I pan around, you can see that there are patterns in the ground. Whether those represent artifacts or not, I don't know. There are also posts with pieces of paper on them, the ends of some of these. These could also have been made by the archaeologists to lay out a grid. Okay, there's the cathedral, so I'm going to pan down to what I think is about southwest direction and go over and look at those buildings that are sitting up on those hills. There you can see part of what looks like a drainage system. And this area here to the south-southwest of the cathedral is all very flat, although there is a general slope from my right to my left. It's a relatively small structure seen from the inside, but its location would seem to me to be very militarily relevant. It sits on the highest point, and it sits right at the entrance to this estuary or river outpouring, whatever it is. Get a little sense of the height difference here. Of course, the tower's elevation was much more useful, at least for observation. Another building on the other side of the corner of the point, if you will, overlooking the water. Kind of undercut cave-like structures. It's also where some of the refuse of Panama City washes up. I don't know if this was ever deep enough that it could have functioned like a quay, but perhaps. There I am behind the cathedral and the Cabillo. Cabillo was the town hall in essence. Some kind of stone artifact, but I don't know what it was or what it would be for.